Before Olympus, before the rule of Zeus, there was another war, older than time, forgotten by gods and men alike. A war not for kingdoms, but for creation itself, when the heavens turned against their own blood, and the sky rained fire upon the earth. This was the Titanomachy, the first rebellion of the divine, a war where immortals bled and eternity trembled beneath their rage. You are now entering the myth abyss, where forgotten myths awaken, and the gods remember why they learned to fear the storm. Titanomachy, the War of Greek Gods in Heaven. Part 1. The Forgotten War in Heaven. Before Olympus, before light, before the idea of good or evil, there was only the sound of eternity breathing. Before time was counted, before the seas had a name, the heavens were not the blue cradle of the divine. They were vast, unshaped, a storm of creation and decay, locked in an endless embrace. From this chaos rose the first order, beings of impossible power and ancient will. They were not gods, not yet. They were Titans, born from the union of Gaia, the earth who nourishes, and Uranus, the sky who watches all things. Together they gave the void form, mountains, seas, the hidden fires below. But in the silence of their making, they forgot what silence could hide, because every act of creation casts a shadow, and in that shadow the seeds of rebellion began to grow. The first heaven was not a paradise. It was an empire built on awe and fear, its pillars made of stars, its throne carved from the bones of sleeping worlds. And upon that throne sat Uranus, the first king of heaven. To mortals he would later be remembered as the endless sky, but to his children he was the tyrant of eternity. He saw in his offspring not love, but threat. Each titan stronger than the last, each one a reflection of his boundless might. Their voices shook the firmament, their laughter echoed through time, and Uranus, jealous, eternal, trembled. So he cast them down, burying his own blood deep within Gaia's flesh. The earth groaned in agony, and her cries became thunder in the dark. In her pain she created something terrible, a sickle forged of night and stone, sharp enough to wound a god. And she whispered into the dreams of her youngest son, Cronus. "Rise, my child," she said, "for your father has chained his children in my heart. Take this blade and free us from the sky." Cronus listened, and in that moment the first sin of heaven was born, patricide. When Uranus descended upon Gaia once more, Cronus rose from the shadows. The stars dimmed as he struck, one blow that split eternity itself. Uranus fell, his blood scattering across the cosmos, birthing creatures of terror and sorrow, the Furies, the giants, and the ash-tree nymphs, beings that would haunt the line of gods forever. Cronus stood over the body of his father, holding the blade that ended the first age, and in his reflection he saw the beginning of another. He freed his imprisoned kin, and with them built a world untouched by decay, a golden age where even death bowed before him. But in the silence that followed the slaughter, the words of prophecy returned, the last breath of Uranus echoing through the void. "As I have fallen by my son's hand, so too shall you." And for the first time, the king of time felt fear. The golden age was not as golden as poets remember. For though the Titans reigned over heaven and earth, Cronus ruled through dread. He built his throne in the highest firmament, surrounded by clouds that bled gold and ash. Below him, Gaia slept uneasily, her body scarred by her son's war. Above him, the stars whispered to each other of rebellion yet to come. Cronus sought to silence them, but prophecy cannot be silenced. It crawls through the roots of creation and waits for the right soul to awaken it. From the union of Cronus and his queen, Rhea, came the children destined to end him, the Olympians. But that part of the story is yet to come. For now heaven stands trembling, its peace a fragile lie, its ruler haunted by the memory of the blade that once fell from the sky. Cronus' laughter echoes through the void, but beneath it a whisper stirs, a child's cry, faint yet eternal, born somewhere far away, hidden beneath the shroud of time. And so begins the song of the Titanomachy, a tale of sons devouring fathers, of gods devouring sons, and of heaven itself learning that power is not eternal, only borrowed. The stars still remember the first war in heaven. When they flicker, it is not the wind that moves them. It is the memory of Uranus' fall and the shadow of Cronus' crown. The age of Titans had begun, but as with all ages, it too was already ending. Part 2. The age before the gods. When the first blood of heaven touched the earth, it did not vanish. It gave birth. From the wounds of Uranus, new beings crawled into existence. The heavens were no longer silent. They screamed. Giants rose from the earth, their eyes burning with rage inherited from the fallen king. The Furies, black-winged daughters of vengeance, flew into the night, carrying the scent of divine blood wherever they went. And in their flight they whispered a promise. No crime against blood shall go unpunished. Thus began the age before the gods, an era of power and stillness, where the Titans reigned above all creation. Cronus, now lord of the cosmos, ruled from a throne made of storm and shadow. The world was young. Oceans glowed with starlight. Mountains breathed mist, and forests whispered the songs of creation. Mortals had not yet been born, for even the concept of mortality had no place in this age. The Titans were eternal, their hearts bound to the rhythm of the universe itself. Each Titan ruled a realm, not as mortals would rule kingdoms, but as forces of nature take their form. Oceanus, the endless sea, encircled the world, his waves reaching beyond the edges of the known. Hyperion, the Titan of light, bore the sun upon his shoulders, his radiance painting the heavens each dawn. Themis, the keeper of order, wove the first laws, not written but felt, the divine order of all things. And Mnemosyne, the mother of memory, recorded all that had been and all that would ever be, carving history into the bones of time. This was a golden harmony, but harmony cannot exist without fear. Cronus ruled not with love, but with the terror of prophecy. He remembered his father's words, the echo that never ceased. Your son will do to you what you have done to me. And so, beneath the gilded calm of the heavens, paranoia began to root itself in the heart of the king of time. Cronus watched his kin with suspicion, and his queen, Rhea, with cold restraint. Every flicker of her gaze, every whispered prayer, he saw as betrayal. He sought to control fate, not by changing it, but by consuming it. When their first child was born, Cronus looked upon the infant with both awe and terror. In the laughter of his son, he heard destiny laughing back. And so he reached out and swallowed his child whole. Rhea screamed, but the heavens remained silent. One after another, her children vanished. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each devoured, each erased from the world that awaited them. The king who had slain his father now turned his hunger inward, a god devouring his own blood to silence the voice of fate. But fate cannot be silenced, only delayed. Meanwhile, the world outside Cronus' throne began to shift. The Titans, though loyal, felt the unease ripple through the air. The rivers ran slower. The stars dimmed. Even Gaia, the mother of all, felt her heart grow heavy. For she had seen this story before, the rise, the fear, the fall. And though she loved her son, she began to weep for the world that would come after him. In her sorrow she spoke to the winds, and the winds carried her voice across creation. It reached caves and oceans, mountains and stars, and somewhere in that journey it reached Rhea, the silent queen of the Titans. And when her sixth child stirred within her, the earth itself whispered, "Hide him. For this child is not meant for darkness." Far away from the golden halls of Cronus, beneath the shadowed slopes of Mount Dick, a child was born in secrecy. The sky thundered, not in anger but in recognition. For this was the child that prophecy had promised, the one who would bring storm and rebellion, Zeus, son of thunder and vengeance. Rhea held him close, knowing that if Cronus discovered the truth, the heavens themselves would bleed again. She wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and placed it in Cronus's hands. Blinded by fear, the Titan swallowed it without hesitation, and for the first time fate smiled. The child was hidden deep within a cave, guarded by divine spirits, the Curites, whose blades clashed in rhythm to drown out his cries. The goat Amalthea nourished him, and her milk became the strength of storms. Lightning danced above his cradle. Even as an infant, the air around him trembled with power unrestrained. He grew in silence, but the silence was never peaceful. In dreams he saw visions, a golden throne wrapped in shadow, a father devouring his children, and a world yearning for liberation. The blood of the sky flowed in his veins, but so did the defiance of the earth. And in that union of elements, something new was born, not a Titan, not a man, but a god. Meanwhile, Cronus felt unease clawing at his heart. He began to hear whispers, not from others, but from within, the voices of the children he had devoured. Their laughter haunted his dreams, their cries echoed in his chest. The king of time was being eaten from the inside, not by flesh, but by guilt. And somewhere beyond the stars, the one he had failed to consume grew stronger. Lightning gathered on the horizon, and the heavens began to tremble once more. The age before the gods had reached its end. The throne that was built on betrayal was about to face its reckoning. When power fears its own reflection, the war for heaven begins. The storm was coming, and this time it would not stop at the gates of heaven. Part 3. The Birth of Zeus. Every age of tyranny births its own undoing. Hidden from the eyes of heaven, beneath the trembling heart of the earth, a child was growing, unseen, untouched by the corruption of his father's reign. The world outside still knelt before Cronus, the devourer of generations, the god who had silenced his own blood. But the silence was thinning, and in the cracks of that silence, the sound of thunder began to breathe. In the caves of Crete, Rhea watched over her son. The air shimmered faintly, not with warmth, but with an electricity that made the rocks hum. The boy's eyes glowed with storms yet unborn. His heartbeat echoed like distant thunder. The nymphs who guarded him whispered in awe, "This is not the child of the golden age. This is the storm that ends it." They named him Zeus, a name that would one day become both prayer and curse. He grew not among palaces, but under stone and shadow. His laughter carried through caverns, and the wind outside answered with reverence. Each day he gazed upon the world beyond, the stars above, the sea below, and he wondered what kind of god could rule such beauty with fear. Far above him, in the skies that once belonged to Uranus, Cronus sat upon a throne that no longer shone. The once golden light of his crown had dimmed, its brilliance swallowed by the dread that lived within him. He dreamt of his father's fall, the blade, the blood, the scream, and every time he woke to the same thought, "It will happen again." To the Titans he was still king, but in his heart he was already a prisoner of fate. As Zeus grew into youth, Gaia herself took notice. She watched as he climbed her mountains, as he learned to command the winds, as his words echoed like lightning through the air. And in him she saw balance, the fury of the sky and the compassion of the earth. She whispered to him in dreams, "My grandson, son of Rhea, child of thunder, the time will come when the chains of heaven must break again." Zeus would awaken from those dreams breathless, his skin alive with energy, his mind filled with visions, a sickle of stone, a throne of gold, and a hand stretched toward him, devouring everything he loved. Years passed. Zeus became more than a child of prophecy. He became the embodiment of will. The nymphs who raised him could no longer hide the power within him. When he spoke, storms gathered. When he struck the ground, lightning answered. And when he closed his eyes, he could feel the pulse of the world beneath his feet, the same pulse that once gave life to the Titans. But power without purpose is chaos, and Zeus did not yet understand the weight of what he was born to do. Until one night, the sky itself sent him a vision. He saw Cronus sitting upon his throne, surrounded by clouds that bled black rain. The air was thick with the cries of souls unborn, his devoured siblings, their faces pale and silent, trapped within their father's eternal belly. They called to him, their voices faint but desperate, "Brother, free us." When he awoke, he knew what must be done. Guided by Gaia's voice, Zeus journeyed into the farthest reaches of the world, to the river of night, where light and shadow were born together. There he found Metis, the Titaness of wisdom, whose mind saw both past and future as one. She looked upon him and smiled, for she had long awaited his arrival. "Son of the storm," she said, "you seek to end the rule of time itself, but you cannot fight what you do not understand." Zeus knelt before her, his pride swallowed by purpose. "Then teach me, Lady of Thought. Teach me how to challenge the devourer of worlds." Metis led him to the pool of memory, a place where the reflections of gods were stripped bare. In its depths he saw every age of heaven, the rise of Uranus, the betrayal of Cronus, and the blood that never truly dried from the sky. "This," Metis said, "is the curse of power. Every ruler of heaven fears his heir, and in that fear he becomes the monster he once defeated." Zeus turned away, the truth heavy in his heart. He understood now the war he was destined to fight was not only against his father, but against the very pattern of creation itself. Still he did not waver. "Then I will be the one to end it," he said. "The sky will no longer eat its children." Metis smiled faintly. "Then take this gift. she whispered, and from the pool she drew forth a chalice filled with golden liquid, a potion of remembrance and awakening. "Give this to your father," she said. "Let him remember all that he has consumed, and watch what follows." Zeus returned to the heavens disguised as a cupbearer. Cronus, worn and weary, welcomed him without suspicion. The god of time drank deeply from the cup his son offered, and as he swallowed, his body began to tremble. He felt fire in his veins, and the screams of those he had devoured erupted from within. Cronus fell to his knees, and one by one, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon burst forth from his body, reborn. The heavens split with their cries. Thunder answered thunder. The air itself trembled as the lost gods of the new age drew their first breath. Cronus looked upon Zeus, realizing too late who the stranger was. "You," he growled, "you are the one." Zeus met his gaze with the calm of the storm before the lightning. "No, father," he said. "I am the storm itself." And with that, the first bolt of divine thunder tore through heaven. Thus began the rebellion of sons and daughters, the war that would burn for 10 long years. The Titanomachy had awoken, and the sky itself would never be the same. Even gods are born from the ruins of fear. But it is what they do with that fear that shapes the heavens. The storm had finally broken, and the world would soon learn that the end of one god's rule was merely the beginning of another's. Part 4. The War of the Titans. The war that followed was unlike anything the cosmos had ever witnessed. For when the heavens rage, mortals vanish like dust, and when gods clash, the very fabric of creation trembles. This was Titanomachy, the great war of heaven, when the children of the old world rose against the fathers of eternity. It lasted not days, nor years, but 10 long ages, each soaked in divine blood and thunder and ruin. The earth itself split open as armies took shape on both sides. From the blackened peaks of Mount Othrys, the Titans marched, colossal beings, forged before the dawn of memory. Their eyes burned with molten gold. Their skin gleamed like the bones of mountains. Cronus led them, his sickle gleaming, carved from the very night that once devoured his father. Beside him stood the old powers, Hyperion, lord of the sun's flame, Iapetus, whose wrath cracked the seas, and Atlas, whose shoulders could carry the heavens themselves. They looked upon the sky with hatred, for it no longer belonged to them. Cronus' voice thundered across the battlefield. "Let the heavens remember who ruled before the usurper's cry. We are the true flame, the firstborn of chaos." But high above, upon the peaks of Mount Olympus, a new storm gathered. Zeus stood at its heart, lightning in one hand, resolve in the other. Around him assembled his siblings, freed from the belly of their father. Poseidon, lord of the seas, his trident gleaming with storms. Hades draped in shadow, with a gaze that froze the souls of gods. And beside them the great goddesses, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, each wielding the power of renewal, destruction, and order. Then came the allies who would change destiny. From the depths of Tartarus the Cyclopes emerged, one-eyed giants who forged thunder itself, and the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones, monstrous beings cast out by Cronus, now roaring for vengeance. For the first time the heavens would see the gods take arms against gods. When the first thunder struck, the sky itself cracked in two. Lightning and flame collided, hurling shadows across the cosmos. The Titanomachy had begun. Cronus swung his sickle, and stars fell like dying embers. Zeus answered with bolts of lightning so fierce they split oceans into steam. Atlas rose from the battlefield, lifting mountains and throwing them like stones. Poseidon called forth waves that devoured cities yet unborn. The Titans roared, their voices earthquakes, their steps avalanches. But the Olympians struck back with fury born of youth and justice. Each clash shook the pillars of existence. The rivers boiled, the forests turned to ash, and the very winds screamed. Day and night lost meaning, the sun shattered into storms, and the moon wept blood. This was not a war for dominion. It was a war to decide what the world itself would become. For 10 endless ages, neither side yielded. The Titan's strength was ancient, eternal, unyielding. But the gods possessed something the old ones had forgotten: evolution. Zeus and his kin adapted. Each defeat became a lesson. Each loss carved them sharper, stronger, more divine. In the 7th age, the Cyclopes forged for Zeus the thunderbolt, a weapon born from chaos itself. For Poseidon, the trident to command the seas. For Hades, the helm of invisibility, to move unseen through death's domain. Armed with the gifts of their allies, the gods rose again. And Zeus spoke words that echoed through eternity. Let the old world end, so a new dawn may rise. Then he hurled his thunderbolt, a flame of divine judgment, at the heart of Mount Othrys. The mountain exploded, shattering into fire and stone. The Titans fell back, their ranks broken. Hyperion was burned by his own light. Iapetus was swallowed by the sea he once commanded. And Atlas, unbroken but defeated, fell to his knees as the sky collapsed upon him. Cronus, wounded and defiant, faced his son one last time. Father and son, time and thunder, locked in a duel that would define eternity. When it ended, silence returned to the heavens. Cronus lay broken, his sickle shattered. The age of the Titans was over, but victory would not come without consequence. As the dust settled, the world was unrecognizable. The rivers had turned to fire, the sky bore scars that would never heal. Even the gods looked upon their creation and felt the weight of what they had done. Zeus stood amidst the ruin, lightning dimmed, his heart heavy. He had not only defeated his father, he had become him. The same cycle that once consumed Uranus and Cronus had begun anew. For power, once tasted, never releases its hold. And as the gods took their thrones upon Olympus, a whisper passed through the void, a prophecy that one day their children too would rise. The war was over, but the echo of Titanomachy would never fade. Part 5, The Fall and the New Order. When the last echo of thunder died, and the dust of war settled over the fractured heavens, the cosmos fell silent for the first time in 10,000 years. The air was heavy with the scent of burnt stars. Mountains still bled fire. Oceans trembled, afraid of their own depth. The Titans had fallen, and the age of their dominion was gone. But peace did not follow. For when gods conquer gods, what remains is the shadow of their own victory. The aftermath of heaven. From the ruins of Mount Othrys, Zeus descended with the weight of eternity upon his shoulders. Behind him followed the new pantheon, his brothers and sisters, their faces lit not by triumph, but by the reflection of ruin. Hades stood silent, gazing into the abyss where the Titans once ruled. Poseidon's trident rested heavy, the seas he commanded still boiling with divine wrath. Even Hera, proud and regal, could not look upon the carnage without sorrow. They had won, but at what cost? The old world lay shattered. The sky bore the scars of rebellion, and the earth wept beneath the ashes of titanic blood. In the silence, Zeus raised his hand, not to strike, but to seal the past. He spoke with a voice that trembled through the fabric of creation. The age of Titans ends here. Let their names be carved into stone, and their power chained in the depths of shadow. For the world cannot bear 2 eternities. The punishment of the Titans. One by one, the fallen were brought before Zeus, the conqueror, the new king of heaven. Those who resisted were cast down into the pit of Tartarus, a realm deeper than death itself. It was no mere prison. It was a wound in creation sealed by agony and fire. There the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones, became their wardens, standing as living towers of judgment. Cronus, stripped of his sickle and crown, was dragged to the edge of the void. Zeus looked down upon his father, once the devourer of gods, now broken and hollow. Cronus' voice cracked through the silence. You think you have ended the cycle, child? But power never dies, it only changes hands. And Zeus answered, his words colder than thunder. Then let it be chained forever. He cast Cronus into the abyss, where time itself bent and broke around him. Atlas was sentenced to bear the heavens upon his shoulders, a punishment without end. Others, like Iapetus and Hyperion, were bound in chains of fire, their screams echoing through Tartarus for eternity. Thus the Titans, the rulers of the first age, were erased from the heavens they once shaped. Their names became whispers, their power buried beneath the foundations of Olympus. The rise of Olympus. From the ruins of Othyres a new mountain rose, Mount Olympus, radiant and vast, crowned in lightning and cloud. It was not forged by mortal hands, but by divine will, a throne suspended between heaven and earth. Here the new gods took their seats. Zeus, ruler of the skies, seated upon the highest peak. Poseidon, master of the seas, at his right hand. Hades, lord of the underworld, below, ruling the unseen realm. Around them gathered the new order. Hera, queen of gods. Demeter, giver of harvest. Hestia, keeper of flame. Together they brought structure to chaos, sky, sea and underworld divided, balance restored. The cosmos began anew, bathed in divine light, yet still trembling beneath it. For though Olympus shone, the shadows of Tartarus still stirred below, the whisper of prophecy. But even in victory the gods could not silence fate. Deep within the darkness, the Moirae, the Fates, wove their threads once more, and upon the loom of destiny a prophecy took form. It spoke of a day when Zeus too would be challenged, when his blood would give birth to one who would overthrow him, as he had overthrown Cronus, and as Cronus had overthrown Uranus before him. The cycle was not broken. It merely slept, waiting for its time to rise again. Zeus heard the whisper, and fear entered even the heart of a god. He had defeated his father, but could he escape the fate that ruled them all? And so, to defy prophecy, Zeus vowed to reign with wisdom and might, to rule not through hunger, but through order. Yet even as he swore it, the storm within him never faded. For every god who holds power dreams of keeping it forever. The new dawn. As centuries passed, the world began to heal. The skies cleared, rivers flowed, and mountains stood once more. Mortals would rise, fragile, fleeting, yet filled with the spark of divinity. For in their creation the gods saw a reflection of themselves, ambitious, curious, and destined to rebel. From Olympus Zeus watched the dawn break upon a quiet world. The thunder slept within his grasp, and yet, in the silence he could still hear the echo of his father's words. Power never dies, it only changes hands, and so the gods ruled. But somewhere deep below, in Tartarus, Cronus dreamed. And in that dream the old world waited, patient, endless, inevitable. Part 6. The Eternal Cycle of Power. The war was over. Olympus stood unchallenged, radiant, divine, eternal. But beneath the gold and thunder, something ancient still breathed. It was not peace. It was the pause between storms. For the world, like its gods, was bound to a truth that no blade or lightning could ever kill. Power is not a throne. It is a curse that waits to be passed on. The birth of the cycle. Before gods ruled the heavens, chaos was all there was, a silent sea of potential. From it came the first beings, Gaia, Uranus, Tartarus, and Eros the earth, the sky, the abyss, and the spark of creation. And when Uranus claimed the heavens, he chained his children beneath the earth, fearing their power. But Gaia rose against him through Cronus. And when Cronus took the throne, he too devoured his children, fearing their rise. Then came Zeus, who broke the cycle with fire and thunder, yet built a new throne upon the bones of the old. 3 generations, 3 rebellions, 3 kings of heaven, each born from the fall of the last. And the wheel continued to turn, for the universe in its dark perfection knows only one law. Creation demands destruction. The reign of Olympus. Under Zeus the skies cleared, the seas calmed. Mortals rose and built their cities in awe of their divine masters. Temples touched the clouds. Sacrifices burned in the name of gods whose stories had already written themselves in blood. Zeus ruled with might, Poseidon with tide, Hades with silence. They built an empire not of love, but of fear and worship. And yet, cracks began to form even within the marble halls of Olympus. The gods grew proud, restless, jealous. Each sought dominion over the others. And from that divine envy, new wars were born, not of titans, but of gods themselves. Ares thrived on conflict. Hera plotted vengeance against her husband's betrayals. Athena rose from the mind of Zeus, not as a child, but as wisdom incarnate, armed and divine. Even the new gods began to mirror the old, their ambitions echoing the titans they had once cursed. And so, unseen by Zeus, the pattern began again. The same ambition, the same pride, the same hunger that had once brought down the heavens. It whispered through Olympus like smoke before a storm. The prophecy returns. In the depths of Tartarus, where the condemned still screamed, Cronus stirred in his chains. Though time had no meaning there, he felt it, the pulse of change, faint but growing. He smiled in the dark, for he knew that even gods cannot silence fate. Far above, the oracle of Delphi spoke once more, her eyes white with divine flame. A son born of thunder shall fall by his blood, and from his fall a new fire shall rise, brighter than Olympus, and deadlier than time. Zeus heard these words and trembled, for he knew their meaning. He had overthrown his father, and one day, One of his own blood would do the same. His fear became tyranny. His justice became wrath. He sought to command fate itself, but the more he fought it, the tighter it bound him. For even gods cannot kill prophecy. They can only delay it. The rise of rebellion, the centuries passed, and the seeds of rebellion began to bloom once more. Mortals questioned their gods. Heroes defied them. Some, like Prometheus, who stole fire from man, were punished for their defiance, chained and tormented. But their rebellion was not in vain. For every mortal who rose against the divine, the cycle grew closer to repeating. Zeus felt it, a shadow rising, not from the Titans below, but from within his own bloodline. For destiny had already chosen the next challenger, and his name would one day echo through heaven and earth alike. Zeus's own son, born of mortal flesh and divine spark, a being who would not just defy gods, but end their age. The prophecy of the end of Olympus had already begun to unfold, the reflection of eternity. In the quiet that followed centuries of worship and war, Zeus stood upon the edge of the sky, staring down at the mortal world. He had everything, power, immortality, dominion, and yet felt the same fear that once haunted his father. He remembered Cronus' words, the ones that echoed still through his mind. Power never dies, it only changes hands. And in that whisper, Zeus finally understood the truth. It was not he who ruled the world. It was the cycle, the endless dance of rise and fall, creation and ruin, order and chaos. Every god, every throne, every kingdom, all of it would one day crumble into dust. And from that dust, something new would rise, just as he once did. For in the eyes of eternity, even gods are but brief flickers in the endless dark. The eternal flame, as the stars shifted and the cosmos turned once more, the gods watched, knowing their reign would not last forever. They saw mortals rise with fire in their hearts, with stories of rebellion and defiance burning in their blood. And somewhere, in the shadows of prophecy, the next war waited. A war not of titans nor of gods, but of those who would dare to challenge both. The wheel turned again. The storm gathered once more, and the echo of Titanomachy, the war that began all wars, thundered through eternity. For power never dies. It sleeps and waits to be born again. Outro. And so ends the tale of the Titanomachy, the war that built the heavens and broke eternity. But in every myth, the abyss waits. For gods fall as mortals do, and every throne eventually turns to dust. If you've walked this far into the storm, subscribe and descend deeper into the abyss, where forgotten gods whisper and lost myths breathe again. This is Myth Abyss, where legends are not told to comfort, but to remind us that even divinity bleeds.